Ever feel like Bitcoin's this exclusive club? Like you need a secret handshake just to understand it, let alone, actually use it.
Yeah, it can feel that way for sure.
But what if I told you there's this company, Fedi, and they're using this whole Bitcoin thing to actually empower communities, especially in places where, frankly, traditional banks are about as common as like a snowstorm in the Sahara.
And what's really interesting is that Fedi isn't trying to reinvent the wheel. They're tapping into this really old idea. It's been around for centuries, actually, especially in the global south. Think community banking.
So less about algorithms and more about like people you can actually shake hands with, right? Because honestly, that's what this article kept emphasizing. This whole idea that Fedi's approach, it's as much about the community aspect as it is about the code. There's this one example from the article really stuck with me.
You thinking about that story, the collective in rural Senegal?
Hmm.
The one where they're pooling their money, supporting local businesses without a single bank branch for miles.
Yes.
That blew
My
me away.
mind, it's like it totally challenges our whole Western view of what a financial system is supposed to look like.
Right. It's a good reminder that innovation isn't always about, like, the latest gadget. Sometimes it's about taking these traditional practices that work and figuring out how tech can amplify them.
And that's where Fedi comes in, right? They're using Bitcoin to do just that. But it's not just Bitcoin, is it? There's this whole other layer, this lightning network. And honestly, that's where I started feeling like maybe I do need that secret handshake.
The Lightning Network. Yeah, it can sound intimidating, but think of it this way. It basically just makes Bitcoin transactions, faster, cheaper, more practical for everyday use. Imagine sending a few cents to buy a coffee without any of those crazy fees. That's the kind of speed we're talking about.
So it's kind of like the difference between sending like a telegram and firing off a text message. They both get the information across, but one's a whole lot smoother, especially if you're going back and forth a lot.
Precisely.
But why go through all that trouble? What's the big why behind all this Fedi tech?
I think it boils down to one word: custody. Fedi's not just making transactions easier. They want to revolutionize who gets to hold the keys.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack that metaphor a bit. When we're talking about the keys to the kingdom in the world of money, what are we really talking about?
Control,
Yeah.
ownership, the ability to decide what happens to your money, without having to ask a bank or a government for permission. And that's what Fedi is trying to decentralize.
So instead of your money being like controlled by some huge institution miles away,
Right.
Fedi is trying to put the power back in the hands of.
The community itself. They've developed this really innovative protocol. It's called Fedimint. Think of it like building a bank vault, but it's owned and operated by the community,
Right.
specifically for the digital age.
Okay, now we're talking. A community-owned bank vault. Now that's an image I can get behind. But how does that actually work? I mean, do I need like a supercomputer in my basement to be a part of this Fedimint thing? Okay, now we're talking. A community-owned bank vault. Now that's an image I can get behind. But how does that actually work? I mean, do I need like a supercomputer in my basement to be a part of this Fedimint thing?
Not at all.
Wow.
Remember those community banking examples we were talking about?
Yeah.
It's a similar idea, really. Fedimint, it kind of takes that same principle, but translates it to like the digital world. So instead of relying on like one central authority, Fedimint spreads the responsibility around. It
Yeah.
uses a select group of users. They call them guardians.
Guardians. Okay, now that sounds like something straight out like a fantasy novel, guarding the treasure of the community or something.
Yeah, exactly. Think of them like the keepers of the keys to this digital vault.
Okay.
Except instead of one key, you need a majority of the guardians to agree to access the vault. Makes the whole system incredibly secure.
All right. I think I'm starting to see how this all comes together. But what happens if one of these guardians, say, I don't know, suddenly wins the lottery and decides to run off to a deserted island, phone off, no internet, the whole bit?
Well, that's the cool part. See, even if one guardian or two or even a few disappear completely, the vault's still accessible. As long as a majority are still around, you're good. It's like having a backup plan for your backup plan.
Wow, that's some serious redundancy.
You got it.
Thinking about it, it really hits home just how big of a deal this could be, especially in parts of the world where, things aren't exactly stable. I'm talking political instability, conflict, places where traditional banking is, well, risky at best.
Absolutely. And, the source material really drove this point home. They were saying how in some parts of the world, financial privacy, it's not just about like keeping your transactions hidden. It can literally be a matter of, personal safety.
Right.
Having control over your money, your assets, without having to rely on some central authority that could be compromised, it's a game changer in those situations.
Yeah, it's easy to forget, sitting here, that for some people, just opening a bank account, something we do without even thinking about it, it can be a huge deal, even dangerous. And this Obi Nwosu, the guy behind all this, he seems to really get that. And this Obi Nwosu, the guy behind all this, he seems to really get that.
He really does. Obi's story it's pretty incredible, actually. He's always on the move, traveling, giving talks, meeting with everyone from like community organizers to, big-time investors.
Wow.
Yeah. The article made it pretty clear this isn't just about tech for him. It's about actually making a difference,
Yeah.
creating a more equitable world.
And a big part of that is changing how people see Bitcoin, right? Because let's face it, a lot of people, especially the ones, calling the shots, they hear Bitcoin and they think, what? Dark web, illicit activities, that whole thing.
Exactly. And that's the uphill battle Obi's facing, trying to convince these policymakers that this technology, it can actually empower the very people they're supposed to be, helping.
Right.
He argues that for someone living under an oppressive regime, having financial privacy, it's not just a matter of convenience. It can literally be the difference between life or death.
It's like these two completely different worlds colliding,
Yeah.
And suddenly those debates we have about financial privacy, they take on a whole new meaning.
Right. Highlights how important context is, right?
Yeah.
What might seem like, I don't know, a niche issue in one part of the world, it could be a matter of survival in another.
Totally. And it's a good reminder that progress isn't always like a straight line. Sometimes it takes people like Obi with that kind of unwavering belief and dedication to really shake things up, show everyone what's possible. And even with all the challenges, I gotta say, the article ended on a pretty hopeful note.
It's hard not to be a little bit optimistic, right? Obi really believes in this. He believes that Bitcoin, especially when you combine it with tech like Fedimint, it's got the power to completely change the financial landscape.
Which I guess circles back to that question from the beginning. If this community-based approach, this decentralized way of doing things, if it can work in the places that need it most, could it also offer some, I don't know, valuable lessons for our own financial systems?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Could this be a glimpse into the future of finance?
Yeah.
One where trust and collaboration, they're not just buzzwords, they're actually the foundation of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And not just for, marginalized communities, but for everyone.
Hmm.
That's something I'll definitely be thinking about.
Me too.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe someone listening right now, they're already building that future, one Bitcoin transaction at a time. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Catch you next time.